Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to yet another Telecom Wise Guys webinar from your friends here at Commio. I'm really excited that I feel like this webinar has been a long time coming. We've got Brandon Ramirez here from the campaign registry. Brandon, thanks for making the time.
Of course, happy to be here.
Yeah, we had a webinar last month talking about all things 10 DLC as well as toll free and short code, and I think we spent a lot more times on the questions for you all than we did on, I think, the master content, which is not surprising. I think there's still a lot of people out there that have questions, and that's partially why we've invited everybody in today to ask questions of you, Brandon. I know you don't have all the answers. Hopefully you have some. That's all we ask. But
Yep,
again, I
I'll do what I can.
really appreciate your time. And I will reiterate too. I think here at Cameo, it's this is actually, I'm a couple days away from my fifth anniversary here at Commio. And, I go back to the days where, we had folks who were customers of ours who were basically putting, application to person messaging, message campaigns over person to person rails back up at the carrier layer. It was an interesting start to adding text messaging on top of voice, which is, of course, is how Commio and at first think started. So now that these 5 years have gone by, I feel like we've come really full circle, both on the messaging and the voice side in terms of compliance and registration and really sort of helping the ecosystem clean itself up. So with that in mind, I wanted to jump through, Brandon, a few slides we can talk over, and
Mhm.
then of course everybody who's on the call make use of that Q&A button. You probably came with some specific questions. Feel free to put them in there. We'll answer them as they come in and when we get to the Q&A section. Um, but let's get started. So I guess, Brandon, would love to know a little bit of the history. Where did the campaign registry came from, and what do we use it for? What do we need it for?
Yeah, well, it's actually funny that you mentioned your coming up in your 5 year anniversary. I just had my 5 year anniversary with the campaign registry as well in October.
There,
So,
there you go.
that said, we've been around for about 5 years now.
Hmm.
We weren't fully being utilized for the first little bit. A lot of development time and kind of building out the concept and making TCR what it is, but in terms of actual registration and being fully in market, being adopted by the carriers, it's been about 3 years now that we've been doing this. And we came about basically, like you said, it was previously A2P. Businesses were using long codes, traditional long codes that were meant for for P2P, for person to person communication, as an unsanctioned business channel, which was never what it was intended for.
Right.
It was kind of like the Wild West. No one knew what was going on. The carriers didn't know what was going on. It was just that you could send whatever, you could buy a bunch of numbers, send whatever you wanted, right? So we
Correct.
came about as a proposed solution to help fix this. We proposed our solution. Carriers liked what they saw, and worked with us, and they all signed up for or signed on to have us be kind of the de facto registration point for 10 DLC messaging, right? So once 10 DLC was created, um, the official 10 DLC channel for the sanctioned business messaging on long code. The carriers then, decided to adopt TCR, work with us to develop the product, and now it's, if you want to have access to 10 DLC, you need to register, which is a good thing. It's
Yep.
obviously, um, there was a big learning curve for a lot of people who never had to do any registration before, but it is a good thing. It brings clarity. People know, basically the registration, we collect who you are and what you intend on doing, right? So the
Right.
carriers now, everyone in the chain, not just the carriers, but you guys, the DCAs, everyone in the chain knows, cool, here's who the messages are coming from. Here's what they intend on sending. Because of that, we'll give you access to this better business messaging channel. It's approved sanctioned business messaging channel of 10 DLC. So that's kind of the brief history of TCR, how we came about, and where we are at now.
That's right. That's right. And it's like I said too. It reminds me a lot of when Stir Shaken popped up on the voice side of things, where unfortunately the FCC had to step in to get the carriers to do what they needed to do. And it gave a chain of custody for a phone number from beginning to end, so we could actually figure out who was in in the ecosystem delivering these calls, and we knew who to go to if there were any issues. And
Yeah,
it feels like TCR is basically trying to do the same kind of thing for messaging for one type, right? 10
yeah,
DLC. So makes perfect sense. And I think we all agree that in this ecosystem that that the more we can have chain of custody, the better, and hold each other accountable.
yeah.
Um, and let's see, we already have good questions coming in. Jeff, thanks for that. We'll get to that when we get after the slides. But like I said, use that Q&A button, and we will get to those as we get a little farther along. So if we start with registering the brand, I know, Brandon, there's been some confusion about some of the steps in registering your brand. And I know part of it was, some folks coming in and wanting to do a brand registration don't have an EIN number. So
Mhm.
when does that pop up, and what can people do about that?
Yeah, so at TCR we do have a option for what we call sole proprietors, or what are sole proprietors, right?
Hmm.
We realize that if you take a look at the numbers, there's you know I would say arguably a much larger portion of businesses, especially in the U.S., are small businesses or sole proprietors. There's tons of them.
Right,
People that I might, I don't know, do paintings and sell them out of my apartment, and I file all my taxes under my own personal, my SSN. I don't have an actual registered business, right? And that's
right.
totally fine. We account for that. We allow for sole proprietor registrations. Now that said, it is a different process. Um, it's not the normal standard brand registration process. There's not a lot of validation that we can do on a sole proprietor like we would do on a normal business, where we verify the EIN, we check the legal name, all that kind of stuff. We can actually verify that, yeah, this is that business, right? With sole proprietor, we can't necessarily do that because we're not capturing, SSNs. We're not doing any of that verification. So we implemented, there's one-time PIN code verification that's needed. There's additional work that is needed to be done by each service provider or CSP that wants to support sole proprietor registrations for their customers. There is additional work that needs to be done by them. Because of this, not every CSP out there wants to support sole proprietors, right? And that's totally their prerogative to do so. A lot of them do, a lot of them don't as well, right? So we do offer that ability to do that. It just depends on each provider whether they want to support that on their end.
Got it. Yeah. So if you're a sole proprietor trying to work with somebody like Commio, it's just you need to work with your provider on making sure that that is supported, right? Making sure that can be done.
Mhm.
Makes sense. Um, and then let's talk about agency versus brand, because I know that again, we've got you know, brands who go to an agency and then they ask the agency to register them, and in some cases that agency actually registers themselves as the brand, right? And I think people get confused, and you want to avoid that.
Yeah, and yeah, that's a fair point. I mean, we see that actually quite a bit. I get asked that a lot. And the answer is, I mean, by definition, within the TCR, ecosystem, the brand is who the end user believes they're communicating with. That's who should be the brand, right? So if
Right,
if it's Pizza Hut, and they're working with one of these agencies to send their messaging, it's not the agency that is communicating with a brand. It's Pizza Hut, right? The end
right,
consumer believes they're communicating with Pizza Hut. Therefore, Pizza Hut needs to be registered as a brand. So these agencies that support a lot of brands, maybe they support a lot of small businesses and they want to kind of just register themselves as the brand. It's not the correct path. It really should be who's actually communicating with the customer, right?
right.
Um, so really, in that case, each individual business should be registered as a brand with its own campaign versus the agency registered as the overarching brand and kind of lumping everyone together. That's not how it should be done.
Got it. Got it. So, Brandon, I know that usually there's two ways to register with you all. Somebody like Pizza Hut, for instance, could go directly to the campaignregistry.com and register themselves as a brand, right? And then when they find a provider, they can, work with that provider. So,
Yeah. So actually, a quick correction on that one.
yeah,
The campaign actually doesn't actually work directly with individual brands or businesses. So Pizza Hut could not come directly to us and sign up to and register directly with us. We work with the campaign service providers, the CSPs like Commio, right? Who
right.
are responsible for then registering their customers into TCR. So
That
yeah,
makes
an
sense.
individual business cannot come and sign up with us directly.
Gotcha, gotcha. That's right. So you got to have both ends to be able to make the registration. That's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
makes sense. Makes sense. I guess I was getting confused because we offer um, APIs and we have a platform as well where you can go and register. So there's sort of, three ways to get the job done, but you have to
Yeah.
have the provider in play. Makes sense. Makes sense.
Exactly. Yeah. You ultimately, as an individual business, Pizza Hut, Brandon's paintings, whatever it is, you need
Yeah,
to register through a provider.
that's right.
Yeah.
You got it. All right. And here's a good question here. For when it comes to registering campaigns beyond the brand, what are the DCAs looking for, when it comes to the campaign registration?
Yeah. I mean, the simple high level answer is clarity, right? They want to know um, everything that's going on, right? In the sense of registration, ambiguity is never going to be your friend. Vagueness is going to hurt you. You want to be clear. You want to paint a picture. So in registering a campaign, I would say, in my opinion, the most important fields where you can be descriptive is the call to action or message flow field, where you describe how a user opts in, right?
Hmm.
Be very thorough. Users opt in by going to this website and taking a form. They can also do it verbally over the phone. Describing all the ways that a user can opt in is very, very important. Additionally, the campaign description field. If you were to register, let's say, an account notifications campaign, and the description was, "We send account notifications," doesn't really tell you what's actually happening, right?
Right.
And that would be a very vague answer. So that field's a free form field. It supports a lot of characters. Putting like, "Hey, we're a doctor's office. We send appointment confirmations. We send appointment reminders. We also send things like doctor availability from wait lists or whatever." Just paint a picture and clearly describe what's happening on this campaign. What's it used for? Because when not only if people are registering via your front end solution or your connectivity partner chain, whoever is doing, anyone in the chain that's doing the reviews, they want to be able to look at it and go, "Hey, I understand exactly what's going on here," right? If there's any vagueness or any ambiguity, like, "I don't understand this," guess what? They're most likely going to reject it for not enough information. Um, Something else that the DCAs are looking for a lot right now, which everyone either listening in on the call or you guys yourself, Tim, things like the terms, conditions, and privacy policy, right? That's a big
Right.
kind of hot topic right now. I can't go too much into that because we're not a compliance house, so I can't comment on why those things are needed, but I would say refer to the anyone that wants to do messaging, regardless of the channel, toll free, 10DLC, short code, you need to follow the best messaging principles and best practices as set out by CTIA, right? That guide covers
Correct.
all of it. It applies to all messaging channels. So, terms and conditions, price, that's part of it. It wasn't needed before on long code when it was just sending on the unsanctioned P2P channel. That's why people never really did it. If you're coming from the short code and you're using short code before and you're now switching to 10DLC, you know all about that. You know why it's needed. But people that are new to 10DLC or maybe didn't have to do it before, now all of a sudden they have to do it. It's a learning curve, but those are the things currently that DCAs are most looking for. So without going too much more into the terms, conditions, and privacy policy, because I can't,
Yeah.
but yeah, I'd say from the TCR perspective, selecting the correct use case and being descriptive, it goes a long way in getting things approved the first time.
Yeah, I think you'd agree, Brandon, that you want to go through the registration process after you're very clear on obviously who the brand is, you have all their information and the campaign. You know what the sampled messages are going to be, you know what the use case is going to be. You have all those descriptors in place. You don't want to rush and do this too early in the process, right? You want to wait until you're ready to, get started.
Yeah,
Yeah, gotcha.
exactly.
Yeah, we have people that unfortunately rush and then they get multiple bounce backs and then they wonder what happened. And if they had taken a breath and they had, sort of worked with our experts through the process, it could have been one and done. But I think some people
Yeah,
are sometimes on the technical side and they just see it as a roadblock to getting a campaign launched. And that's not really the best way to think of it. It's really more about, when you're ready to register yourself in the phone book, for instance, or a really formal place that really matters, getting your passport, you got to have all the right information. It's kind of the same idea.
exactly,
Don't rush
exactly.
it. Um, and also, this is the question we get a lot. By the way, we have some great questions that have come in. Jeff, James, Adam, thank you. We'll get to your questions in just a moment. But this question comes up a lot is, okay, we registered the brand, we registered the campaign. What about our throughput? Like, how can we either increase it or from the beginning guarantee good throughput for our messaging?
Yeah, so that's a great question. We get asked that a lot. So, quick overview of the process. When a brand is created and verified, right? You have to be a verified brand in order to start registering campaigns. Every verified brand gets access to the entry level of throughput for both AT&T and T-Mobile. That's the starting point. If you're okay with that, go ahead. If that's sufficient for you, create your campaigns. You're off to the races. If it's not sufficient for you, or if you grow over time, the best way to get your throughput increased is to apply for an external vet. So we have third-party vetting organizations, Aegis
Right.
Mobile and WMC Global. You can use either of those. They're fully integrated with us. You can order it through our platform. Some service providers have direct relationships with Aegis or WMC from previously, so they can order directly and import the vetting. But vetting is the first starting point to increase your throughput. So when a vet is done, they check a lot of things about the business, length of time of business, history, number of people that work in the business, any previous TCPA violations or messaging lawsuits. They do a big deep check on the brand and come back with a score from 0 to 100. And that score, depending on where it is, puts you into the appropriate service level with the carriers. Hopefully it goes up. Sometimes it may stay the same, depending, if there've been major issues before, it could keep you in that low tier. But that's step one to do that. And if that fails, there's measures after that you can do. But step one is if you need to increase your throughput, apply for vetting, and that will hopefully yield you a sufficient throughput level.
Got it. Yep. Makes a lot of sense. All right. And I actually see a few of the questions are related to this, but even after somebody has registered a brand and a campaign, they've been sending messages over time. Those messages tend to drift in terms of content. So
Mm-hmm.
can you give people guidance on, hey, at one point this campaign was registered and running successfully. Maybe now it's not running or it's not in compliance anymore. How do you sort of deal with sort of a campaign that's shifting over time?
Yeah, so the campaign. Well, let me start by saying the use case of the campaign. So step one, whenever you're registering a campaign, you select the use case.
Hmm.
We have a bunch of different use cases that are kind of they should encompass the majority of messaging needs. But that once you select a use case, that is not editable. So
Hmm.
let's say you register a 2FA campaign, right? And
Right.
over time, you want to incorporate promo codes as well, or coupons, right? Marketing type stuff into that as well. But guess what? You can't do it on that campaign. You need
Hmm.
to register a new campaign that may be something that offers both 2FA and marketing. We have these mixed use case campaigns where you can do up to 5 kind of sub use cases on that one campaign. So step one is selecting the right use case. And if your campaign drifts over time, you want to start adding more stuff, set up a new campaign, sunset the old one, move your numbers over, and then you can continue to go with the new content. But if the content drifts, so typically campaigns stop because they're suspended. We don't campaigns. We don't see traffic, so we're not monitoring whether campaigns are continuing to do what they say they are doing. We're not the ones making decisions on deactivating a campaign or anything like that. Typically, campaigns get suspended if there's been multiple complaints, on the traffic from consumers, or if people discover that, hey, you said you were doing customer support only, and now you're primarily exclusively doing marketing and sending links to promo codes and stuff, which is, that is not what you said you were doing, right? So that's
Right.
typically why campaigns get suspended. Now we do allow within a campaign. We understand that there's traffic drift, right, and things evolve over time. And so we do allow certain attributes of the campaign to be editable. So, for example, let's say you registered a mixed use case campaign, right? And you selected marketing, customer support, and 2FA as the sub use cases, right? And your marketing traffic, it's still there, but or the customer support, it might vary a little. So now you can actually edit the campaign description and say, hey, our it's evolved to customer support is now also including kind of this area. You can actually update the details of the campaign, especially the campaign description, to make sure that it's still compliant and everyone knows what's still going on with that campaign. So if something does happen, they can go back and refer and say, oh, yeah, it was updated on this date. This is now there. You're good to go, right? So
Right.
the one thing is, yeah, like I said, if the use case completely changes, the best bet is to register a new campaign that includes that, sunset the old one, or if you want to keep them two separate ones, that's totally fine as well. But the use case is something that will not be editable ever. The campaign attributes and descriptions, yes, those can be edited, but the actual use case itself, that's something that cannot change.
Got it. All right. Makes sense. And we were going to ask you, Brandon, directly, we had a little drum roll in here, what are your tips, your top three tips for providers themselves in terms of brand and campaign registration? And when we're out here talking to folks that are looking for a partner to help them with this, what should folks that are getting into messaging look for in a provider?
Yeah, that's a great question. We actually get that we get that a lot too. So there's I'm sure you guys know. I mean, I know everyone on the call probably has seen it. There's a lot of misinformation out there. People take information, they kind of interpret it their own way and disseminate that down the chain. So I would say the top three things for providers are make sure that you're always up to date with TCR news, TCR updates, that you can then educate your own customers down the chain to make sure that things are done correctly. There's a lot of people out there that they create a front end solution. They don't teach their customers how to use it. They just say, "Cool, you have to register." Well, what does that mean? It
Right.
means you have to register, right? There's no additional help or support or anything like that. So, when brands ask, obviously we have to remain impartial, being the registry. We can't promote one provider over another, but we always say, look for someone that offers support and and especially at the beginning, will hold your hand and guide you through the registration process. Because for people that are new to this, it's a whole new, even people that have been doing messaging for a long time. This whole 10 DLC and whole registration point, yes, it's been around for 3 years. That's still relatively new, right?
Yeah.
It's still a fairly new process. So being able to really educate the brands that are needing to register, and educate them why this needs to happen, what the process is, what the information is needed, so that when they go to register, like we talked about earlier, don't register kind of until you're ready. Make sure that you're, as a provider, make sure that you're educating your customers, and make sure they know all the information that is needed and why it's needed, so that when they go and register, it's a smooth and seamless process, right? And they understand why they're doing it. So I'd say, if provider says, "Hey, what can I do better?" Education is key in this. In my opinion, education is key.
Yeah.
That's why we're helping join these webinars, and we're
Right.
putting out new guides and education from TCR that CSPs can then use and share down the chain and stuff like that. So education. I mean, if I could do top three tips, is education, education, education. That's
Yeah.
that would be my stance. Obviously, on customer support or customer care, right? And that education is my main
Yeah.
thing. So any provider that helps TCR spread this information and really holds their customers' hands, especially in the beginning, that's the provider you want to look for. And as a provider, if you can do that, all power to you. I support that fully. But that would
Yeah.
be the biggest thing, is education, and really help your customers understand why this is happening and why this is needed.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, that's one thing we've invested in a lot here in Commio, is having the right people in the account management team when new campaigns start, to make sure that you can get everything registered properly and increase your throughput, keep it high. So totally agree, and that's why we're on this webinar today, right? It's all about keeping folks educated about what's going on, because we do
Yeah.
change. And speaking of change, before we get to your questions, everybody, thanks for hanging on. As we look ahead to 2024, kind of what are the near-term changes do you see coming from the TCR side of the fence?
Yeah. So, um, coming into the end of this year, and I'd say maybe the first quarter of this year, we're adding some new functionality to make things a little bit easier. Things like migration capabilities, where a CSP can migrate their campaigns. Maybe you work with one upstream provider and you want to move to someone else. We're going to be able to shift those campaigns. Right now, you kind of have to re-register all those campaigns with the info. We're going to be able to migrate those, which is great.
Yeah.
The main goal for 2024, that's kind of the big thing we're working on right now. But the main goal for 2024 is, you know, not try not to change things too much and implement big changes, right? From a TTAR perspective, I mean, like I said, we've been around for 3 years. We've been doing this. Yes, there's been a lot of changes as growing pains and things that we thought were covered that maybe weren't, and other things, other people, DCAs, CSPs, brands, carriers, everyone pointed out, hey, we didn't solve for this. We need to solve for this, which is why we've obviously had a lot of major changes over the last 3 years. But I think now coming to 2024, we've kind of the dust has kind of settled on a lot of the major changes. There might be some, we still might uncover things that we haven't thought about, which require a change. But in my opinion, 2024 is really going to be focused on upgrades, process improvements, ease of use, better functionality, just things to improve the registration process and improve kind of quality of life for using TCR versus, hey, guess what? Now you have to do this completely differently, right? Which was
Right.
the case previously, right? So that's our main goal. Like I said, I can't say that changes won't happen, but I think the majority of major things have kind of worked themselves out now, and now it's working on improving and getting things more streamlined.
Got it. Got it. All right, great. Well, Brandon, let's go ahead and dive into the questions. We've got quite a few here. So we'll start with Adam's questions. Adam asked, how do you register a business that has multiple locations but doesn't share a common name? For instance, a franchise where the name of each location is different. This is common in property management and the automotive sectors.
Yeah. So that's a great question. I actually was just talking about to someone else about this yesterday. So it kind of depends on how the business is set up. So let's say it's ABC Mechanics, right?
Hmm.
Is the overarching company, and they have ABC Mechanics of I'm based in Canada, so I can use some Vancouver names or some Canadian names. ABC of Vancouver, and then they have I don't know, ABC of I don't know, Los Angeles or whatever, right? They have different locations. The names change slightly, but overall they're all rolled up into the same business and they all share the same EIN. In that case, it really depends on how they want to be separated. So what you could do is register, ABC Automotive or whatever I said as the overarching brand with the EIN, and then you could register separate campaigns for each location that they have. Another option would be, if that's one option. You could do, we don't limit, or we allow brands to register multiple times using the same legal name and EIN, right? There's no limit on how many times a brand can register. So you could register, ABC Automotive, this with DBA, Brandon's Automotive over here. You could register it again with the same legal name EIN with another DBA name for the other location. You could do it that way as well. So it kind of depends how as the provider or whatever, how they want the separation to be. Some people like to really have individual registrations that's just how they like it to be done. I've seen property management companies where they're like, hey, we want to have a separate registration for each building that we manage. It's all under our property management thing, Brandon's property management group. But I want to have a separate brand registered with each DBA with the building name or whatever, however I separate it from my own knowledge and my own records, right? I've seen other ones that
Right.
say, hey, I just want to do this and register a separate campaign for each one, right? So there's a couple ways to do it. You can, like I said, you can register the same brand multiple times using the same EIN and just change the DBA name for each one if that's going to kind of best suit their needs.
Yeah, I think Adam's goal here was, he wanted to register these as a franchise to benefit from the lower price point instead of having to register every
I
location
see.
separately. Yeah.
I see. Yeah. So if each franchise has its own EIN, it really should be registered separately. A
Right.
perfect example is Subway, right? Subway, they have multiple, they're all franchises.
Right.
Some people might own multiple ones. And now we have a use case called agents and franchises. So if it's Subway corporate, right? Subway corporate wants to register and they want to send out a national campaign that covers every single Subway location, and they have
Mhm.
dedicated local phone numbers for each one, so that it looks like it's a local number. That's fine. You can register the agents and franchises use case, put all those numbers on there. You're good to go. But if each, if a separate Subway location wants to send its own in-store promotions, hey, this only applies to this one. Guess what? You should be registered as your own brand, have your own campaign, so you can send your own content.
Got it. Got it. He also said, how do we successfully register campaigns where the call to action and the info collection for the opt-in happens offline? So apparently he says we're frequently rejected because of CTA privacy policy issues on a website, even though the website is not involved in our customer data collection flow or opt-in flow.
That is a good question, and I need to tiptoe around this one a little bit because, like I said, we are not a compliance house. I can't strictly advise on how to do that. I would say when you're putting details into the call to action field, if you're not already doing this, be very thorough. Hey, we do not use a website to collect opt-ins. Opt-ins are done offline via a paper document, or maybe when an employee signs this contract. Be very clear exactly how it's done and how it's not done, so that when people see it, they can go, oh, okay, I understand exactly how it's done. Now, right now, we don't offer a place to upload. Let's say if it's done via paper document, and the people reviewing want to see that paper document so they can make sure the correct language there. We currently don't offer a place to upload that. It's something that we're working on and we're talking about internally to be able to accept document uploads to support this stuff. We don't have it right now, so unfortunately, that would need to be done, offline via your provider. So, like, say for example, if it's if you're working with Commio here, you could provide that additional document to Commio, and they could then forward it up the chain to their provider who's doing the reviews, whatever. But that, I would say, that call to action field should be very, very thorough, outline how you do it, how it's not done, all that kind of stuff. Now, what we can account for is making sure that the DCAs and people that we're reviewing should be checking and reading that to make sure that they fully understand. Sometimes if they have a bunch, they might click through a few and kind of skim through and not fully read it. Hopefully that's not the case, but it may happen, human error. But I would say, yeah, be very thorough in that call to action thing. I can't really comment much more on what happens outside of TCR.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
we're not compliant.
But I think it's safe to say, and I know you can't talk to compliance, is that no matter how you're capturing opt-in, you need to capture it, right? Whether
Mhm.
that's digitally or, on a piece of paper. And you need to hold on to all of that data because there will come a time where something may happen. As we all know, especially on these iPhones, there's a real easy button at the bottom that says, report it, right? And when that gets reported, even with one report, they're going to come asking for that opt-in information. Potentially, they're going to ask for other data as well. So no matter how you're doing it, you got to keep track of it. So, and again, we
Exactly.
can,
And if enough people hit that report button,
yeah,
guess what? The carriers will review and potentially suspend the campaign, right?
yeah,
Even if the stuff's not just enough people reporting it, right?
yeah. And I'm not sure if you're able to speak to this either, but we find that even if a given campaign, if you get close to like 0.5% of the opt-ins, are marking as spam or reporting the content, that'll get you in trouble. So it literally only takes a handful of reports to potentially get you into an auditing phase, and it can impact, your delivery. So it's important to be really clear on all these steps, right? And holding on to that
Yeah,
original opt-in because they're going to come
exactly.
asking. Yeah. Erica had a great question. Will the already approved campaigns need to be re-vetted if they are migrated from one CNP DCA to another?
That that depends, I think. So while we will allow for the migration functionality to take place, uh, we're not the ones ultimately doing the reviews and setting that policy. So if if the chain is, let's say a chain is moving from like CSP that registered it to the first connectivity partner to this DCA over here, and now it's completely changed to a whole new chain, and everyone in the chain is completely different. I suspect they'll want to maybe do the reviews might be lighter, seeing that this is a migration flag versus a brand new campaign. Maybe it's a lighter review, but I imagine they'll still want to review because maybe what one DCA allows on their network versus someone else might be slightly different.
Hmm.
If the DCA if the final DCA is ultimately the same, but the path in between kind of changes, but still kind of one goes this way and the other one goes this way, maybe they won't need to review it because they've already done the review, right? So that one's tough for me to answer. It's going to be up to the policies of the DCAs who are ultimately doing those reviews and the various partners in the chain.
Right. But I think it's safe to say that if you're considering making that change, you can certainly ask and get the information you need before you
Absolutely,
trigger it. Yeah. Okay.
absolutely.
Jeff had a good question. He said we have had problems with Verizon adding extra filtering while AT&T and T-Mobile did not. Are there any updates on Verizon not doing their own thing?
I can't comment on that. We're not involved in
Okay.
the messaging channel. We're not involved in the
Right.
messaging chain at all. We don't see messages. We don't route messages. When it comes to filtering and blocking, that's out of our purview.
Yeah.
Um, I can say I haven't heard of anything,
Hmm.
but that doesn't mean that nothing has happened. Right?
Yeah. I think we all agree some of the carriers behave differently than the others. So
Yeah,
we can't always account as to why, but
absolutely.
it's their pipes. They want to keep them clean, and they're all doing their own thing. So we have
Yeah.
to play by their rules. James had a great question. He goes, "We're getting rejections of unable to verify, need a website or working website or complete CTA information if opt-in occurs outside of the website 804. So our customers are getting verbal confirmation before sending a message. What do we need to provide a TCR for verbal opt-in on a campaign?"
Yeah. So again, this kind of tiptoes that compliance line of where I can and cannot go.
Yeah.
But within TCR, I mean, as long as you're very, very clear in that call to action that we only collect verbal opt-ins, we do not use any other website or any other form or anything. It's all done verbally when someone calls in. I mean, right now that's kind of the only stuff that you can enter into TCR. Like I said, we don't have a place to upload additional forms or anything. That stuff would need to be verified kind of outside of TCR.
Yeah.
But it really comes down to being very, very, very clear with the information that you're entering, in the call to action field, in the message flow field, and the campaign description, right?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and just to be clear, I'm sure everyone knows this, but it's we send the rejection reasons, right? Obviously, we facilitate that when let's say a DCA reviews and rejects a campaign for exactly what you just said. There's not a website listed or opt-in occurs outside. We need more information. We're not the ones actually, it's not TCR that's actually doing those rejections. We're just passing the information along. A lot of people say, well, TCR rejected this for this reason. It's like, well, we sent you the message, but it wasn't us doing the rejection, right? So,
Yeah.
whenever it comes to compliance rejection, so a not a sufficient privacy policy or something about terms and conditions or opt-in, something like that, it's hard for us to comment on because we're not the compliant. We only capture the data. It's the DCAs and the CMPs and DCAs along the chain that are actually reviewing to make sure that it's compliant. So
Right. Right.
unfortunately, with those kind of reasons, right now you need to work. The customer would need to work with the CSP, Commio or
Yes.
whoever else,
Right.
to help escalate and figure that out and work to build in that and provide that information. So
Yeah.
that's kind of not the greatest answer from my side, but unfortunately, that's kind of all I can say.
Well, the second half of his question I think is telling because he says this has been the biggest rejections we're getting as lead gen or affiliate marketing is prohibited,
Mm-hmm.
or other 708. I know that that use case in particular requires a lot of, I wouldn't say extra steps, but let me give you an example. So I think what he's asking about, we're only collecting verbal opt-in. Uh, you know, I'm thinking back to the last two times I was on a call. One time I was on a call with my Verizon, for instance, literally about my phone. And halfway through, the conversation started as a web chat and then it turned into a verbal call, right? And I'm talking to a rep and they said, "Hey, I really want to send you some stuff over text. Can I get your permission to do that?" When I said yes, they sent me a thing to click directly to my phone. And only after I click that, that's how they captured my opt-in. Then they were able to send me messages. I'm struggling to remember. I had a very similar encounter. Oh, it was with my car insurance. So I was on with Liberty Mutual. I'm not saying you should work with them. I've had good experience. But I had to claim because my car died in my driveway. They had to send a tow truck and they go, "Hey, we'd love to be able to send you text updates. Can I get your permission to do that?" I said, "Yes." They go, "Great. Do you have our app on your phone?" And I said, "Yes." So they sent me an alert. I had to hit yes to opt in and then they could text me. So I think that that's probably, and I know you can't speak to this, but we speak to it, is like you got to think of how do you have an opt-in point that you can document, save that information. We have one of those even on the back end of one of our original websites for first party opt-in where you could actually sign your name in a box and it had the date and the time and your email address and your phone number and we would capture every single one of those. So you need to have something that you can capture and hold on to for a long time in case there's an issue, right? So again, I know you can't speak to it, Brandon, but I don't think that verbal opt-in necessarily is going to work unless you're recording those calls and you can provide a snippet and identifiable information. But that's me talking out of school. So that's something where you really need to talk with an expert that's better than me about exactly what else you could do. Let's see. So yeah, and somebody said saying, "Oh, that's interesting." You mentioned earlier that that's not the TCR that's the driver for T's and C's and privacy policies, right? Really, that stuff lives with the CTIA and the other rules that stipulate how you need to handle those things, right?
Exactly. We're
Yeah,
we're just a registry, right? We capture
right.
the data and pass it on to relevant parties to review, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly, exactly. And I think for those of you who have been to any of these other Wise Guys webinars with us, I usually have Scott Navratil on. He worked at Telly. He's been with us a long time, and he'd be the first one to tell you that what are the things you need to have in your T's and C's and your privacy policies. And, you can't really work with third party data. You got to be capturing that data first party. There's so many things that go into it. But again, it's all baked in those CTIA rules. So we
mhm.
highly recommend you to go find those. Um, so let's see. I've got a question here. Can sample messages vary when they register and when they actually send the messages? That's a question. How much can it vary?
Absolutely. So sample messages, they don't need to be templated. It's not like, hey, you can only send these sample messages, especially use cases like customer support, where it's
Right.
very conversational in nature, right? The actual content of the messages may vary conversation to conversation, right? As long as you're putting sample messages that show this is the type of stuff it's a sample. This is the type of stuff that's going to happen on this thing, right? If the
Mhm.
actual message varies a little bit, totally fine, right? A good customer, hey, thank you for reaching out to customer support. How can we help you today? Great, I'm glad that's just a sample message that fits the use case. It falls in line with the business, and it makes sense. That's sufficient. And if things vary a little bit, that is a-okay.
Yep. And I knew somebody was going to ask this because I forgot to ask the follow-up question earlier, but you mentioned about additional vetting that you can apply for, that
Mhm.
third party vetting. How much does that cost? And does Verizon pay any attention to that vetting? Apparently, people are really stuck on Verizon today.
Yeah, it's a $40 fee, one-time
Okay,
$40 fee to apply for vet. Um,
right.
it's an optional vet. You don't have to do it if you don't want to. That's just how you get access to higher throughput, or access to potentially previously unavailable use cases. Um, the vetting right now only really applies to T-Mobile and AT&T, as they currently are the ones that have set throughput rules
Hmm. Okay.
within TCR.
So hence, Verizon does not pay attention to that currently.
Whether they pay attention to or not, it may be in terms of throughput, I would
Right.
say no. But if
Mm.
they are looking at a brand going, hey, what's going on with this? Something's fishy going on, and they see that it's been vetted and got a high score, they have access to that information. They can see it. They might go, oh, this is interesting. Or if they see someone that had maybe a very low score, they go, oh yeah, it makes sense. Maybe that these guys are sending spam or something like that, right? So they don't use it necessarily in terms of throughput, but they may look at it for other purposes.
Got it. James
That's
is
all. I don't know for sure, but
makes sense. James is asking, is there a date from the carrier saying that all numbers need to be registered with the TCR?
as far as I know, no.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
As far as I know, carriers do not set uh, registration deadlines. Provide some of
Right.
the CSPs may and DCAs may
Yes.
like, hey, all of our
Correct.
customers need to be registered by this time.
Yeah.
I will say TCR will not set deadlines
Yeah.
because we can't force
Yeah.
people to register. But yeah,
That's what happened with us. We were told we had a deadline and we had to make it. So luckily we had a couple months to do it and we've hit it. But yeah, that came directly from the DCA. Michael's asking, what's the ETA on transferring campaigns between service providers? Let's say somebody wanted to do that.
okay. So let's say Pizza Hut registered. Pizza Hut's the brand they registered via I don't know another CSP, and they want to then move that registration to Commio,
Yep.
right? That scenario. I don't know.
Mm,
That is in terms of migration capabilities. This may sound bad, but that's kind of the lowest rung on the ladder right now. A CSP that wants to move 10,000 campaigns from one provider to another is I don't want to say more important, but
Sure.
it's something we need to solve for first
Yep.
versus a single brand just wanting to go and move to another provider. Typically, and not just in messaging, but in any business, if you want to go somewhere else, you got to start fresh with them, really,
Yep.
right? So that's kind of how it works with with brand migration, or why we're not supporting brand migration at this time, is because that the CSP that registered that campaign owns that campaign registration. I can't see them wanting to just give it to somebody else, right? So right now, unfortunately, we don't support that. We don't have an ETA. If a brand wants to move its registration, its brand and campaign registration to another provider, they need to go register again. One
Got it.
thing you can take with you is your vetting ID. So if you've been vetted through the first provider, you can get that vetting token from them. And then when you go and register via your new provider, you can actually import that vetting token and have it apply again, so you don't have to pay that vetting fee again.
Oh, nice. Okay. Well, at least
Yeah.
it's a start.
Yes.
Let's see. We had another question here. So when a company is setting up SMS for employees only and their CTA is rejected because we need to show the process, what does this mean? What exactly is the process, or how should the customer respond to this type of rejection?
Yeah. Again, that's kind of more in the compliance matters. I mean, employee messaging, it's still for business. It's still considered A to P, so it does need to be registered. Typically, when it's employee messaging, I worked at a company before where this was the case, and when signing our contracts, there was a thing about you get your phone number, and you can you're going to be using it for this, and you agree to be messaged by the company, whatever. So it was built into the contract. That I think that is fairly common with employee messaging, or when you sign on, you have to sign something that says, yeah, you're going to be using this responsibly or whatever. That if you outline that and describe that in the call to action field, that is a start. I don't know if that is. I can't comment on whether that's 100% sufficient or not. The DCA reviewing it may want to see a sample, or that snippet from a sample employee contract that kind of shows this.
Yeah.
I can't say for sure, but typically there's still something that says, I agree to use this phone number or be messaged by the company or something like that, even for employee communication. So just really outlining that in the call to action field, and being very clear would be helpful.
Got it. Got it. James, I'm hearing you loud and clear. Your question here was, hey, this webinar is great. Thanks to the TCR, but can we do one with a DCA like Cineverse to talk about opt-in and privacy policy? Great idea. Great idea. We've been working on getting somebody from Cineverse on here for a while, and we will keep pushing. I like the idea, James. Thank you. Michael's asking, it's not really a TCR question, but I haven't run into a situation where we need to submit opt-in proof for a suspended campaign. How does that typically happen? Have you seen that happen, Brandon? Where somebody's asked to submit opt-in information?
Uh, I have. Um, so that would be done outside of TCR.
Yeah,
Currently, like I said, we
right.
are working on adding things where we can upload supporting documentation and stuff like that. But uh, right now, so if let's say a DCA rejected a campaign, hey, we need proof of opt-in, that notification would go back to the CSP. The
Yeah,
CSP would need to collect that and pass it outside of TCR via email or up through to their provider, up to the DCA to provide that information so the DCA can review and hopefully unsuspend. But right now that
yeah.
is done outside of TCR. But
Yeah, I was
I
gonna
have
say,
seen it, yeah.
yeah, I was gonna say we've been asked for that, right, on behalf of our customer, and then we go back to them and say, all right, what's your opt-in? Show us the
Mhm.
data, and we're the ones who would keep that going. Yeah, makes sense. Another question here. What's the current turnaround time if a company wants to submit a new campaign or to change their use case? What kind of a time can they expect?
Yeah, that depends on each CSP and the connectivity chain.
Mhm.
Especially because TCR is not, we're not involved. We collect the data, we pass up a chain. We're not doing the reviews. We're not involved in the reviews. We can't facilitate or expedite reviews. It really depends on how many people are in the chain. So if the CSP that is registering the campaign works directly with one of the DCAs, that's a much shorter chain and should be a much shorter review time. If
Yeah,
there's entirely a scenario where it could be 3, 4, 5 hops that the campaign goes through to reach the ultimately the carriers, and each person in that chain needs to do their own review, right, to make sure that it's compliant and fits their network. So it's hard for me to say. There was quite a big bottleneck a while ago.
Right.
I believe that's come down.
Yep.
I just from kind of what I've been hearing, I would say it can be as little as a day to a week, typically now, but it could be more than that. But I
Yeah.
would say somewhere in that time frame is probably a pretty safe bet. But don't
Yep.
quote me on that because I can't say for sure.
Right. Well, luckily with Commio, you're only one hop away, and like we do see, it's 4 to 7 days on average. Some weeks are better than others, but and you're right, that whole glut has definitely passed, and we're seeing a lot quicker turnaround. But you
Yeah,
still need to sort of bank on a business week to really get something up and running, or you might get lucky. It happens.
yeah,
Um, let's say Michael's asking, my question was based around my use case of being a software provider with thousands of customers and wanting to switch away from Twilio. Okay, fair enough. Um, let's see. He's asking, what do you find is the biggest misunderstanding about TCR's role in A to P 10 DLC? Interesting question. Biggest misunderstanding.
it's an interesting question. Yeah, so and we actually, as TCR, we created a new onboarding process for any new CSP that wants to sign up to work with us to register their customers. You have to attend our onboarding seminar, which outlines exactly this question.
Hmm.
um, so the biggest misconception is that, well, there's a couple of them. One, TCR routes messages, and we see the traffic, and we are able to help with filtering and blocking. That's absolutely not the case. We're not involved in the message flow at all. The other thing is that the other biggest thing that we see is that we are the ones approving, uh, reviewing, approving, and either accepting or rejecting campaigns, which again is absolutely not the case. We collect the data, we pass, Commio's case, you connect directly to one of the DCAs, like you just said. Commio, accepts the campaign and does the registration, make sure it's good, and registers it, pass it up to their DCA partner. The DCA reviews. We help facilitate that data transfer and passing, but we provide the feedback back and forth, but we're not actually doing it. So that's probably the biggest misconception is people that are coming to us going, "Hey, I registered 2 weeks ago, and you guys are still reviewing it. My provider says you're still reviewing it. Can you please expedite and improve this?" Sorry, we can't because it's not us, right? We can tell you kind of where it is in the chain, but we can't expedite or anything. So that's right now. I would say that's the number one misconception that we have right now is that we are the ones actually doing these reviews and making these decisions.
Got it. Got it. All right. And looks like we have one last question, which is actually more of a request, which is a great request. We actually did a webinar last month with Katie Reddick, who's our director of customer success at Commio, and she kind of went through filling in an entire registration application from start to finish with those fields populated. So I'm happy we'll put a link to that recording in this follow-up email to this recording. If it looks like we had somebody who would love to be able to see what a form looks like when it goes all the way through, and we've got that for you guys. So happy to share that. Well, this is your last chance, guys. I know we have quite a healthy group on today. If there's any other questions you have, now's the time to drop them in here. But I do want to say that Brandon, it has been great to see, the whole TCR process has become, less onerous over time, and we just appreciate all the work that you guys have been doing to help, with this chain of custody of, who owns these brands and these campaigns. And I think it makes for a better ecosystem that we all want to be playing in, right? So it's just a matter
Yeah,
of staying ahead of the rules and capturing opt-in and making sure we're not deviating. So all good things at the end of the day. Just takes time. Just takes time.
I agree.
Let's see. Let's
I
see.
agree.
And James is asking, good question here is, do the CSPs get to pick which DCA they use? I think the answer is absolutely yes, they do. We get to pick at the end of the day. We actually work with several of them. In fact, we're always looking at new ones to, either to, speed up the process to have a better customer relationship. But we have good relationships with all of our DCAs, but we're always looking for new channels to not have a single point of failure, which nobody wants in the cloud or on this interweb thing. We're always trying to have multiple
Yeah.
routes in case we have to pull a a lever somewhere to keep things
Mhm.
flowing. Um, well, great. Well, Brandon, hey, appreciate it. Look at that. We're right up against the top of the hour. Appreciate the time you were spending with us today. I want to recommend everybody, we did record the session today. So if you have additional questions, as soon as we hang up, you're going to think of something, reply to that email. They come to me directly, and I'll make sure I get with Brandon, and we'll answer those questions and add them into a follow-up email. So I guess before we sign off, Brandon, is there anything else you wanted to add to the content today?
No, I think it was good. There was the group had a lot of really good questions. I'm apologies for some that I had to tiptoe around and couldn't answer. But for all the ones I could, they were very good questions,
Yeah.
and ones that we see very very often. So hopefully this webinar can help um, spread the word and spread the good information through the ecosystem. So
Yep. We'll definitely have it up on the website. We'll be emailing out to everybody. And like I said, hopefully, Brandon, this isn't the last time we'll have you in here.
yeah,
We'll try to space these out. And everybody, if you have questions, again, reply to this recording email. I'll get them to Brandon. We'll keep the answers flowing. And at the end of the day, let us know if you're looking for a text messaging provider who can get these campaigns approved as fast as humanly possible and get your messages up and running. Commio might be a good partner for you. So check us out at commio.com. Talk to our experts, and we can verify your use case and hopefully get you up and running with messaging. But if not, there's lots of great providers out there too. So playing in the space. So thanks everybody. Hope everybody had a great holiday. Hope you have a good holidays ahead. And we'll keep the information flowing. And again, thanks to the TCR and all the work you guys are doing. I appreciate it.
you're very welcome.
Thanks, Brandon. Thanks everybody. Have a great day.